your pattern as being the responsible one. What was that protecting for you?
It's almost like identifying which was the strategy that was going to work. So for me, the strategy that worked was being responsible. For somebody else, the strategy might have been being quiet. For somebody else, so the whole thing about the patterns that we've been talking about this week, they're patterns because they worked. So they're patterns because, we got, there was the reward, or there was the something worked in a way that made sense. And so that then it's easier for me to explain it. What was it protecting? Because everything in the early days was pretty chaotic, right? Like, Ukrainian and Croatian growing up, nothing was quiet. Like everything was, could you pass the salt? Like from a European family, right? It's like they're going to war, and it's like, no, just pass the butter. Throw in there alcoholism and not knowing what you were going to get. But holy cow, you just didn't know if plates were flying tonight, whether he's going to fall asleep on the couch, or something else, but more about safety and control, just dampen things down a bit. Yeah. What about you? Because I know you're from the European side too, my friend.
Oh, definitely. We've definitely got the Russian Austrian sort of through my blood and bones over here. It's so interesting because this I really reflect back and think, well, I was always trying to make sure I could gather people in my life. And I know it was because I felt invisible. And so if I could gather people, they would all be around and I would be visible in that space, and I would be bringing the food, and I would be cooking the meals and saying, here, learning to cook myself so that I could make myself seen.
But that was a little while ago, like decades and decades and decades ago. And so like, what up, sister? Like this is stuff that happened decades ago. So what's the risk of dropping that stuff now, or why do some of these things need to stick around now?
The confirmation came with the feeling of reward and the feeling that I was deeply connected to people, and that I was creating this environment where people could be deeply connected.
Right? Because we attached meaning to things back when we were, wandering around the shops at 7 years old. And that meaning has been reinforced, as you say.
I think is that you all of a sudden there's a moment of suffering. And if there's a moment of suffering, then it's about looking at what is that suffering? Where is it coming from? And that's what brings you back to the pattern. You had huge responsibilities on your plate, and then there's the cat sitting that just gets thrown into the mix. Well, there's another way that I can be responsible, and you just sort of all of a sudden go,
yeah. So this is really great. So what we're doing here is we go from that pattern interrupt, that moment where something doesn't feel quite right, and just recalling back, that's the extra request, and that independent side is sort of saying, hey, not a good time. And then we're looking at now, it's like that gives us the opportunity to go there.
Because if we don't go there, we keep suffering. So if we don't go there, we reduce our capacity